Hello, everyone, and welcome back to X's and O's. Right when you said, "Oh, I'm going to do it right after this." Now we're good? Okay.
Making sure we know at the beginning.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of X's and O's, the first one of the 2018-19 school year. I'm Jay Lennander.
And I'm Eric Bunnell.
And we're back with more sports talk right here on the Bison Information Network. As you can see, we are in the studio today, but we'll usually be broadcasting these live from Herd and Horns. But for right now, we're just back home in the studio where it's comfortable, and we've got extra lights and equipment, and it's really nice, easy to set up and whatnot. But something that was also maybe not so easy to watch was the Vikings-Packers game on Sunday. And obviously with a Vikings and Packers fan in the room, we've got plenty to talk about. So Eric, can't really say that either team came out on the losing end officially, but there were definitely opportunities for both teams to seal the deal, a whole bunch of them. As a Packers fan, what were really your takeaways from this game?
My takeaways is that a one-legged Aaron Rodgers can beat one of the top 10 defenses in the NFL. How many quarterbacks can you say that could do that in the NFL?
Not many.
I mean, you got Dan Marino. I don't think he could do it. But Aaron Rodgers then came out after the game and said, you got to be able to play through pain, just like Brett Favre. He gritted it out, and now he's one of the top two. He's a top 2 NFL player of all time in Aaron Rodgers. But the ending, I think that was just horrible. If you think about the ending, Clay Matthews getting that sack, I don't know how that's roughing the passer. There's been many former NFL referees coming out and saying that's not a late hit, roughing the passer, unintentional grounding. He picked him up and braced himself, and that would have ended the game, and Daniel Carlson still has a job because he's only 0-1 after that kick, and you can live with a kick in the upper 40s.
Yeah, he would have been 0-2 at that point.
He would have been 0-1 because he had a kick in the overtime and at the end of the game. I mean, he still has a job. Dan Bailey's still out of a job.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess as a Vikings fan, it kind of is maybe a blessing in disguise that it's like, okay, we found out now that he's not very good under pressure, because it easily could have been, Clay Matthews doesn't get that penalty called against him. We don't find this out about Carlson. We lose not only this game, but then, say, next week's game when Carlson goes another 0-2 game. So it's kind of a good thing that it happened now than say, even later on in the season that it's like, okay, he has a game, and let's say it's the rematch between the Vikings and Packers later on in the year at US Bank, and the same thing happens. It would be much more devastating then than now. And I mean, even now, I kind of saw that it was coming, though the very final one, it's like, okay, he's finally in range. He gets a chance to redeem himself. There's no way.
He played wall shit!
There's no way he makes it. I'm traumatized by the kicking within the past decade of the Vikings. Ever since Ryan Longwell left, it has just not been great. So hopefully Dan Bailey can turn that around. But, I honestly, at the end of this game, was fine with a tie, just because of what you said with the roughing the passers. The Vikings got so lucky throughout the course of this game that they should not have been in the position. Not from like the first quarter, they should not have been in the position that they were in. I mean, once they got lucky a couple times, Kirk Cousins made some great throws. Obviously, Thielen and Diggs were the only people catching anything out there. I mean, Rudolph caught like one pass, but really it was just Thielen and Diggs just making some great plays off some great throws. But outside of that, there was just some pure luck. It was like, wow, the one connection, two connection down the field into the end zone. But it really does come down to that one penalty. The game would have been over, long gone. So even if Carlson misses, 3 field goals, and each one of them probably could have turned the game in the Vikings' favor, dependently on that first one. There's an argument to be made that it's too early to really say what would have happened. But, of course, the last two, both of them would have basically ended the game.
There was a stat floating around there. I think after the 2 penalties that Aaron could have sealed the game, Kirk Cousins was like 28 of, I want to say 35, but he finished with 32 of 48 or something like that, with 4 touchdowns and 2 interceptions.
Yeah, four touchdowns.
425 yards.
Yeah.
He finishes the game, take away those penalties, finish the game with 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Like, Green Bay's defense, actually played amazing. Like, they actually kept him in the ballgame this game.
Yeah, I mean, those rookie cornerbacks,
Josh
people
Jackson
talk
and
about them,
Jair Alexander.
but they played really well. I mean, Josh Jackson came away with the punt block touchdown. I mean, he at least grabbed it at the end.
Yeah, Geronimo Allison with the block.
Jair Alexander had a really big sack at one point coming in off the edge. So, yeah, I mean, one of the biggest problems with the Packers lately has been their secondary, and I think they really drafted well. Like Josh Jackson, I don't think anyone really expected him to be in the second round, but, I mean, there you go.
People were talking about him going after his big interception day against Ohio State when Iowa whooped up on him 55-24 or something like that. They were talking about him going in the first round.
Yeah,
and
easy.
He slips to the second round when Green Bay has 2 picks, 27 and 45.
Yeah, no, I saw early projections, and I mean not like early, but like within a month or two of the draft with him being like 18 or whatnot to the Chargers. It's
a blessing in disguise for Green Bay. Green Bay's got 3 really good cornerbacks on that roster, and Kevin King, who was able to kind of single-handedly hold Antonio Brown down to himself, even with a shoulder injury, Josh Jackson and Jair Alexander.
Yeah.
I mean, our safeties aren't bad. Clinton Dix, Kentrell Bryce, Tramon Williams, veteran cornerback in that locker room. Clay Matthews just got to stop hitting people.
Yeah. I mean, Clay Matthews have been having some problems, and there were definitely times when Tramon Williams got abused by Stephon Diggs.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there were a couple just jukes that were unforgivable. And, I mean, when you get older players in the league at secondary positions, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, with Terrence Newman, you kind of could see that he was going to retire on that one Alshon Jeffrey play in the NFC Championship game last year because he just got burned so bad. And that's what happens with older players is you get someone who's 35 at cornerback versus a 25-year-old Stephon Diggs beast in open field, and it's a mismatch, and you can't really blame that, but they've got the balance is basically what it is now that they didn't have before.
Yeah, the Packers have the balance, like you said, in the backfield. They even have a running game now. Pair Aaron Rodgers with his arm. You're always going to be going up against Aaron Rodgers and his arm. The Packers can run the ball now with Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones and Ty Montgomery in the backfield. But my question is, why didn't Green Bay give Ty Montgomery the ball more? He had 6.3 yards per carry against a top 10 defense. Why aren't you giving him the ball?
Yeah, they didn't use him much. I mean, they had him on kick returns, but beyond that, not much more. But looking at the sort of, I guess, overall matchup is where we can go with this next, is that both sides obviously a little bit disappointed by the tie. It was a good game.
The NFL has to get rid of the tie rules. Go to the college overtime rules. I hate ties.
Yeah, well, but I mean, like I said, from my perspective, I'm pretty happy with the tie in this situation.
Yes, but I hate ties. Or go back to the 15-minute overtime and not do 10.
I mean, that's probably a reasonable change to it, because then it's like, okay, there'd be like 1, maybe 2 more drives in there.
Yeah, I don't know where Minnesota was, what down distance they were when they kicked that field goal. If it was 4th down,
it was like 3rd down, and the clock was expiring.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
there would have been
3rd
another,
down and 6 maybe.
Yeah, something like that.
It was 3rd and long.
Range. Yeah, and then the game was over. So I mean, that's a potential solution, but I guess more what I want to talk about now is Rodgers banged up, Cousins in his first start at Lambeau. What do you really see coming from this matchup now, Cousins-Rodgers, the future of the Vikings-Packers over these next 3 years with both of these guys getting huge contracts? Because this is how it's going to be, is we could be getting this game like every single time.
We could be getting this game every single time, and I know when we go into U.S. Bank over Thanksgiving weekend, Sunday night game, when we come back from Thanksgiving break, it's going to be a huge game. U.S. Bank is going to be probably rocking. Place where Aaron Rodgers broke his collarbone. Thanks, Anthony Barr, by the way. Ruined our season. But anyways, Aaron Rodgers will be fully healthy. How are you going to stop him? If you couldn't stop him on one leg and a hobbled leg, how are you going to stop him with 2?
Well,
and now that he can actually run.
I think the game will be different. It's going to be that same mentality. I think this game is going to be really crazy because of the tie. That both sides really have some unfinished business. But I think you'll have 2 more experienced teams that every single year you get a very different vision of what the team looks like as the year goes on. Like, for example, the Saints last year lost like their first couple games, and then they were great by the end of the year. Probably the same case with them this year. But It's so hard to tell from the first couple weeks. Like the first couple weeks with the Vikings, Sam Bradford gets hurt week 1 last year, and then Case Keenum starts and loses to the Steelers, and everyone's like, oh, the season's over. But you wait until week 8, and they're rolling. Case Keenum's solidified. I think that's going to be the same case with both of these teams, is that Rodgers is going to be fully healthy by that time. Of course, now Dan Bailey signed by the Vikings following the loss. Most accurate indoor kicker, like, maybe ever.
Yeah. Second most accurate kicker in the NFL.
Yeah. And
in NFL history, I should say.
These teams are going to be a little different. I mean, just today, Stacy Coley cut by the Vikings, someone who had a drop pass in the end of the game. Treadwell, they obviously can't cut because...
How do you not cut LaCron Treadwell?
Because they'd be paying him more. I saw somewhere on Twitter that they'd be paying him more if they cut him than if they kept him.
Talk about Butterfingers. I think I could have caught those passes from Kirk Cousins.
I mean, there was a little bit of hope early on when he caught that touchdown pass. It's like, yeah, he's going to have a part in the offense.
Maybe they'll put him at return. Use him as return because he's got speed.
No, he doesn't. He's not as fast as Hughes. Not as fast as Hughes.
Oh.
He was a possession guy. I mean, the reason they drafted him was because he's got those hands.
Those big hands.
Yeah, and he was catching everything from Chad Kelly at Ole Miss. But we just haven't seen that in the NFL.
He's got to use that stick that they used back in the 90s.
The one thing he really had in college has been the worst part of his game in the NFL. I mean, we saw sign some Aldrick Robinson, who I've never heard of, apparently was someone who was on the Redskins at some point when Kirk Cousins was. But it's going to change. Coley got cut. So now the Vikings wide receiver point after, because, the stat I saw on Twitter was that the Vikings are now leading the league in drops, but Thielen and Diggs combined have only one of them.
Wow.
So, that's why all this change is going on.
Speaking of Thielen, he had a heck of a catch in double cover.
Oh, yeah.
I was catching up Bryce just running over. All he's got to do is just stick his hand out and that ball's tipped.
Nope, just falling down. He just brought it
I
right
don't
to
know
him. It was
how.
crazy.
That was just an unreal catch.
Yeah, it was nuts. Thielen and Diggs are not the problem.
But
it's just that they need that third person.
Speaking of wide receivers, they have Jake Weineke, who's very successful in South Dakota State. And then jump across the river to Concordia and Brandon Zylstra.
Yep.
I mean, I know he came from the CFL and he did pretty well over there. Mm-hmm. But those two could see.
I think Zylstra is very likely to see some time, especially now that Coley's gone, because it means that they're either going to be using Aldrick Robinson, who they just signed, unlikely, or Zylstra, because Coley got cut. Treadwell, he might get another chance here or there, but he's on a very tight leash now. And so, like I said, the kind of the point is that these formulas are kind of changing. Rodgers needs to get healthy. The Vikings have some issues to figure out. Dan Bailey's going to be a big solution in there. They're going to have to try either Robinson or Zylstra as that extra outside wide receiver. But another interesting thing that happened today was that the Vikings signed back Tom Johnson, who got cut by Seattle. So I don't know who they're going to be cutting. Thunder Bucket.
Thunder Bucket is back in Minnesota.
He's back. The Seattle let him go, and I saw somewhere on Twitter that he got signed back, which is interesting because I don't know how happy they were with some of the defensive interior that they had in terms of depth.
That interior got smoked by Green Bay.
Yeah. So
I mean, they had a few sacks. I think they had like 1 or 2 sacks.
Not many.
But not many hurry-ups. Mm-hmm. Not many hits except for when they came on the blitz and it took them out of field goal range. Yeah. Rodgers just got to throw that ball away and you're in 56-yarder.
Yeah. But it's experience that they didn't have coming into this game, that they now have back someone who is very familiar with the regime and whatnot. And it's all these little things that I think are just going to be the stuff that kind of builds up so that the next time these two teams play, it's going to be an entirely different matchup. It's going to be even more intense than this one was, and it's going to be maybe one of the best games of the year coming into the playoffs.
I feel like that's going to be the best game of the year coming down the stretch, but both teams have a really hard upcoming schedule with the Rams, Patriots, Seahawks. I know the Vikings already played the 49ers, but the Packers got to play them. Mm-hmm. I think the Rams are going to be a surprise team.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think...
surprise in that they were like the top offense last year and made it all the way.
But I think Los Angeles learned from the Viking game last year. This time it's in LA, I believe.
Yeah.
And then Minnesota welcomes Seattle, but Seattle looks like they're going to be kind of a cakewalk team. But you never know what you're going to get out of Russell Wilson or that defense.
Yeah, and every NFL game is going to be a surprise this season, as these first 2 weeks have
These first
really
2 weeks
shown.
have just blown my mind, and I've tried to pick some games, and I get them wrong because of the Dolphins, Titans, all these injuries and everything like that.
Yep, but we'll be shifting our focus to college football when we come back from these breaks. Conveniently located.
Welcome back, everyone, to X's and O's, and now we shift our focus to NDSU football, who is 2-0 on the year after beating Cal Poly 49-3 and North Alabama 38-7. Jay, what do you make of the first 2 games from the Bison this year?
I mean, it seemed the biggest problem with this last game, because I don't think you can really say anything bad about Cal Poly. That went as expected, just pretty much just a roll through the entire game. I think the biggest thing that stood out to me in terms of the North Alabama game was that there were some pacing issues. It didn't feel as clean of a win, at least at first, as the Cal Poly game did. I think obviously this team, like every other team, as we were just talking about in the last segment, every other team kind of ramps up as the weeks go on. I think this was kind of maybe a little bit of a wake-up in terms of like certain things not working, because there were definitely stalled drives. I mean, both teams punted so many times in this game. Like it was 5 or something for the Bison.
It was unusual of NDSU to punt that many times. Like you don't expect that. You expect him to make a nice drive down the field, at least get a field goal out of it. But they got what, 1 field goal out of the whole game? And
there weren't
5 touchdowns, 4 offensive touchdowns.
Yeah, there weren't any of those big smooth drives until the second half, I don't think. Like, the way offense came about, even though the Bison were up 17-0 at the end of the first half, one of those was a blocked punt that Bruce Anderson ran in for 1 yard. That was their first
That was
one.
an over-the-head snap, actually. That wasn't a blocked punt. Over-the-head snap.
A messed up punt is just something about a
bad
punt.
Bad special teams.
Yeah, bad special teams. Something that the Bison obviously capitalized on, but it was so over his head that it was just kind of like a freebie. But it wasn't a good Bison drive. It was just straight up. Okay, they made a mistake. They made a mistake. We get a 1 yard rush. That's not a good drive. The offense didn't get a good drive until the Dallas Freeman, his longest career reception for 54 yards. Yeah. That's not a long drive. That's one monster
play.
Yeah, a monster pass on a missed assignment
that puts them right. I'm not doing Darius Shepard touchdown.
Yep. It just put them right there on a screen pass. Just boom, done. So it wasn't what you come to see from the NDSU offense. Of course, later on they would get a couple drives. There was maybe only one touchdown. I think it was the Easton Stick 6-yard scramble that it's like, okay, they started on one end and they marched on the other end. Everything else was like, oh, Jabril Cox interception, touchdown, or a big pass to Dallas Freeman. Like, those were the only ones. And then, of course, Trey Lance with a 44-yard touchdown run. This wasn't the, like, status quo for the Bison, I don't think. And that was really the biggest takeaway from this game, is that UNA, to their credit, did not let the Bison play the game they wanted to play.
No, they did not.
The win was not as clean as we were expecting, and I think that's, like we said, kind of a good thing at this point in the year, that it's like, okay, yes, we won 38-7, but we also can definitely see where the room to improve is. And specifically, it's probably the running game, is that they weren't able to control the run game as well as in the Cal Poly game. In the Cal Poly game, it was like 250 yards. They were just all over them. Bruce Anderson could do whatever he wanted. In this one, it wasn't that way. Passing yards, I believe they had more than rushing yards, which is not something you usually see from this team. So I think that's the takeaway. It's still a win, still a good win. They still blew them out, but it wasn't as clean as you would have hoped if you're a part of the Bison.
Well, I think for me, the biggest takeaway, it's not even from NDSU, it's from North Alabama. You come into a dome, you've never played here before. You played, NDSU back in the 80s and everything like that, but North Alabama held them to 38 points in the dome. Normally, and after a bye week, normally you see NDSU just roughshod opponents, and they go up like 65-0 at the half after a bye week. Yeah. But that wasn't the case. North Alabama has speed. And they had speed at every position. They matched up pretty well with NDSU. It's just NDSU's defense is just that much better and that much more depth. And their coach even mentioned that in his postgame. We just need to have depth. And this is a great program to have a powerhouse, like a great program to learn from.
Yeah, and I think that's another big takeaway from this is that this game, had it not been for a couple very specific, minute things, could have been a lot closer. Like, the thing that stood out to me was the very first drive, one of their top receivers, a redshirt freshman, gets injured and he doesn't come back. Like, stuff like that, when you get into the actual game, like, your number 2 receiver on your depth chart going out, that hurts you when it's like, oh, it's 3rd and 3 and we miss it, so we have to punt 11 times in the game. A lot of those punts came in like short situations. There were big sacks early on in the game for the Bison, but that slowed down as the game continued. Like, they would still get consistent pressure, but it wouldn't be as much. So, it could have been closer, honestly. And like you said, to North Alabama's credit, they came in and played a good game. Not every team, not just every random team who's not one of the big Missouri Valley conferences can come in and make the Bison say, okay, we did not play as well as we should have. And the other team was part of the reason for that.
Yeah, and speaking of how you mentioned Missouri Valley, let's shift our focus to next week, where they welcome in Delaware. Delaware is 2-1. Lost the first game of the season, Rhode Island, 21-19. What do you make of the Blue Hens? I mean, they got a top 10 defense in the country. I know they're only 3 games in, but still, that's pretty good defense right there.
Yeah, it's always hard to tell against the Bison if, like, going up against a really big defense is going to be better than going up against a really big offense. Because when you see matchups against James Madison, it's always that, okay, their firepower can match our firepower, and it's just, can our defense hold them back? But when you get a really solid defense, then it can almost become a war of attrition, because we do see those games within the NDSU season where it's like low-scoring games that both teams are kind of grinding against each other. And if this weren't in the Fargo Dome, I think I'd be a little bit more concerned. However, because it's in the Fargo Dome, this game could be closer than the past 2 we've seen. But, I mean, it still plays in the Bison's favor. I mean, when's the last time Delaware was here?
This is the first ever matchup. But their coach was here in 2015 with Richmond when NDSU went on to win, and his Richmond team lost 33-7.
Okay, so they're familiar with what they're getting into, but they haven't actually put it into execution yet.
Yeah.
Which is why I'd be a little bit concerned for them. Playing defense against the Bison, it's better than having to go against them on offense. But, yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be a game that's going to be closer then it's going to be like a big blowout. Like, this might actually be an actual football game unlike the past 2 weeks.
I can see it being like a 31-10, 31-14 game, something like that, where Delaware's going to just find a way to score. Because just a little nugget that I found while reading their depth chart, if any of you guys have seen the movie Invincible, Vince Papale, his son, is actually on this Delaware team. So if your dad made the Eagles as an NFL, you got to be something if you're playing college football.
Yeah, and it's always the little things when it comes to coming into the Fargo Dome and trying to take down the Bison.
You can't have penalties.
Yeah.
If you get backed up to 3rd and long, you're done for. You got to be able to gain, even if you gain 2 yards on 1st down, 2nd and 8, and then throw a little short pass, get 4 more yards, 3rd and 4, that's manageable.
Yeah, and the biggest thing that comes down to like morale, and obviously you're saying, okay, they're going to be able to prepare, they kind of know what they're getting into, but the thing is that let's say the Bison start with the ball and they score right away. All that, we're the number 1 defense, or we're a top 10 defense, that goes away pretty quick once they start scoring on you. So it all comes down to actually being able to walk the walk on Saturday for Delaware, because if they come in and it's like North Alabama and they get a lot of stops quick and they don't let the Bison do what they want to do, and it ends up being, let's say, 7-0 at halftime, or 10-0, or whatever, even 14-0, then you've got some confidence, because it's like, okay, we can stop them. We're not gonna be able to get much against their defense, but of course, you never know. A pick 6 here or there puts you right back into it. So I think it's just about the Delaware defense. If they can establish confidence, if they can stop the Bison throughout the first half, then it's anyone's game, really. And other than that, it just comes down to the Bison offense figuring out how to execute in the ways they didn't against North Alabama.
And now, I don't like to look ahead, because next week, you think NDSU could be kind of peeking ahead of their schedule, and number 3, South Dakota State, sitting right there in the 29th.
Yeah, and that's going to be the matchup. It always is, but man, it depends on what happens against Delaware. I mean, everyone knows that game is next. This is homecoming week, so that obviously means different things to different people. But I definitely think they want to win bad against Delaware so that they've got that momentum going against South Dakota State. Because imagine if they lose against Delaware. Then you got South Dakota State coming in here and you're shook. If
NDSU loses against Delaware, and after last year, after what they did to opponents after they lost, taking NDSU by 20.
I mean, I guess that is the other argument.
I mean, they blew out opponents by, I think, like a bad average of 24 points, if memory serves me correctly, after a loss. I mean, look what they did to South Dakota after they lost. They lost to South Dakota State, it was 49-14, and everybody's like, "Oh, the South Dakota team is so good." Granted, they were really good with Chris Trevler, and he carried their team kind of like an Aaron Rodgers. But NDSU's defense just pinned its ears back and it's like, "You're not scoring on us."
Yeah, and I mean, they might have that mentality against South Dakota State anyway, because that's going to be a big game, but how Delaware kind of comes into that, it's strange, because, every time it's the first matchup between 2 teams in the Fargo Dome, it's like, okay, we don't really have a knowledge base on what happened. We're just kind of all speculating based on the numbers, and it's really hard to just say, okay, there's no way they're gonna win or whatever. It's just a big mess, and it's all speculative, and I don't really know what's going to happen on Saturday. I'm just hoping for a good game, honestly, because
that's what I'm hoping for too.
It looked like it was going to be a good game between these 2 teams on Saturday against North Alabama. It looked like, okay, both teams are kind of struggling on offense. This one could actually have a game come out of it, but it didn't in the end. I just want to see a good football game.
I just want to see a good football game come in Fargo, because we haven't seen one here in a while.
And I mean, if it doesn't happen on Saturday, that's when you start peeking towards South Dakota State.
It'll happen, probably. I mean,
there's going to be a good game.
1 versus 3. And I don't know if you've heard this, but I'm hearing rumblings of College Game Day coming to town on the 29th.
I did see some social media rumblings.
1 versus 3. Normally they come for the atmosphere, but not the matchup. Now they're coming. Now they'd be coming for both.
And with a rivalry of that magnitude,
The Dakota market on the line.
how could they stay away? But we hope you don't stay away from future editions of X's and O's. We'll be back right here every Tuesday making recordings, talking sports. It'll be a really good time. Once again, I'm Jay Lennander.
And I'm Eric Bunnell.
And we'll see you next time on X's and O's.